when you're teaching students about writing in the arts, what are some of the most important lessons you impart to those students? And also, how do you advise them to go forward once they are out of school if writing is something that they want to pursue in any sort of full-time capacity?
Well, I think there's a tendency to fetishize cultural writing as though it was somehow different. The lessons I try to teach to my students are just about basic good journalism. Go out, talk to people, observe things, check your facts, get things right, don't go on rumor. Be aware that people who tell you stuff may have their own motives for telling you stuff. Actually look for solid information. If you don't know, go and find an expert who does and ask them. These are all the principles of basic journalism. They're not special to arts journalism. And I think one of the things for me that is sometimes problematic is that editors assume that any old newsroom junior can write about the arts, because in some ways it's lesser than any other kind of journalism, whereas in fact it is exactly the same as every other kind of journalism. So that's the first thing I would say, is that in many ways, if you want to be a good arts journalist, you have to be a good journalist. You have to understand the value of truth, the value of not messing around with people's quotes to make them more sensational, the value of digging deeper beyond surface appearances, all of those things. So that's what I try and teach. I don't think it's any different. It's an application to a specialized area. So you also have to understand the debates and vocabulary and standards and benchmarks of that area. But it's just good journalism. In terms of career development, for years now, my only lesson on that is have a plan B. In other words, it's very unlikely that you will get a job where you can spend all day, every day, writing about the arts, much as you would love to do so. And therefore, you need to develop other skills, whether they are within journalism or whether they are something different. But preferably, and this makes me, I know, very old-fashioned, not in PR, not in public relations, because there is a straight conflict of interest if you are involved in public relations and also trying to operate as a journalist.
Do you find that happens often? I assume that you mean somebody who's acting as a publicist for an artist, but is also pursuing journalistic desires on the side?
Or who is working for a major PR company, for example, a company that, let's say, serves a major bank that sponsors major festivals or things like that. I think basically because they use a similar skill set, I think that's one of the easier places to get employment. And for some people, and certainly not for everybody, PR is a lot better paid than journalism is, though that is not true for everybody. But I think, no, if you are working in an area where on the one hand you are serving the client, and on the other hand, you are supposed to be serving the readers. That, I think, is where the conflict of interest comes in, because they are two different worldviews. And that, for me, is the major difference between PR and journalism. PR is a perfectly legitimate profession, but your employer is the client. And if the client says, write about this, or write about that, or put out a story in order to detract attention from the other thing, then that is what you do. There is nothing wrong with that. It's an okay job, it's a legitimate job. But that is very different from the mission of journalism, which is to discover what is really going on, whether it suits the subject of your writing or not.